I was very nervous because I had prepared this topic and I thought maybe there is a large audience and they'll ask me questions. And my depth is not that much into this topic, but I have been studying this for last 7-8 days. But I'm happy that I'll be speaking mainly to chairpersons, and so this is something important. I mean, if nothing else, I have learnt a lot and going to implement it in my practice very soon. Coming to coming to obesity, just excessive accumulation of body fat, we know, and some stats there: 2.5 billion adults globally overweight. BMI is the main measure of obesity. Till now, we have been using BMI, and these were the WHO guidelines: overweight, obese, extreme obese. But something has, and then in 2009, the Edmonton obesity staging system was introduced, where they were seeing the medical, mental, and functional outcomes, and but very complicated. I could never figure out how to do it in clinic. Then Lancet Commission, new definition of obesity. 57, 58 specialists sat down. Anup Misra from India, I think, was also participating, and they defined. They gave the diagnostic criteria. They made it too simple. They said excess fat mass. If you have functional and organ dysfunction, it is clinical obesity, and if it is not there, it is preclinical obesity. Preclinical obesity, they thought, was a risk to health, and the treatment goal was lifestyle modification, whereas if you have clinical obesity, then you have to do therapeutic intervention. A day or two later came the consensus guidelines for diagnosis of obesity for Asian Indians living in India, and this was again Anup Misra and his colleagues. Now they said that BMI over 23 is stage 1 obesity, and you even don't require waist circumference or waist height ratio, and this is like preclinical obesity of the Lancet Commission, and this you have to just manage the risk. Stage 2 is BMI 23 with waist circumference or waist height ratio altered, with obesity associated limitations, day-to-day activities, and some organ dysfunction. So basically similar, but they have tried to simplify it. Coming to BMI, we know it doesn't tell everything. Doesn't tell you the fat and the muscle. All these people look obese by BMI, but they are quite healthy. So what is the importance and how to measure the BMI? How to measure the body composition? So what is body composition? You know, all these people coming to your clinics and telling, sir, buy this machine, buy that machine, do BCA. I used to be little skeptical. I used to think whether it's going to help or not. But just some basics, that it will delineate fat and fat-free mass, and fat-free mass is muscle, bone, water, and your organs. Fat is essential and storage fat. Essential is what is stored in muscles and organs, major organs, and essential fat is 3 to 5% of the total body weight. This is male to female difference. Obviously, male have more muscle mass and less fat than the female. The storage fat is what remains beneath the skin, and that is also two things, that is the subcutaneous and the visceral fat. I'll allude to that little later. So the main important thing that we are bothered about is percent body fat, and that is the primary index used to evaluate body composition. And why we are bothered about fat? Because now we are defining obesity because of fat. It is through fat. Excess adiposity is now the definition of obesity, and we know it leads to diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. So is BMI the best tool? Now this was, sir is sitting here, Dr. Banshi Sabuz and Dr. Narwarias. They are both the same BMI. I have taken your photograph. I was searching net for last 10 days, whatever inputs I could get about body composition analysis, and also I got it in this Dr. Jyoti Dev's conference. You both measured your BMI, both BMIs were equal, but your body composition varies. I will not state what it varied, but both of you who are related to obesity, you have said that you have to consider visceral fat, muscle fat, fat patterns, and BMI alone is insufficient, and you have to incorporate this in clinical practice. So what are the methods to assess? height, weight, BMI, waist hip ratio, skin measurements, hydrostatic weighing, air displacement, BIA, and DEXA. Height, I need not allude to. Body weight, any scale will do. BMI calculation, we know. Uh, Now, additional measures of obesity. These are waist circumference, waist to hip, and waist to height. Waist circumference, these are slides I've cropped up from Dr. Anup Misra's presentation, and I will thank him for that. Measurement of waist circumference, he said that 13 people took the waist circumference and all were different. So it looks very easy, but it's not a very easy measure. Waist to height ratio is better because one thing remains stable is your height. So one parameter is the same. So it is more, it is a better indicator. Waist to hip ratio is falling back in popularity because you may over a period of time increase your waist and your hip size, and so your ratio may remain the same, but you may have gained excess adiposity. Skin fold measure, we used to do that before, we are not doing it. This is caliper, skin calipers. You can do it at 3, 4, or 7 sites. These are the 7 sites where you can do it. And this is also a measure of adiposity, but it just measures the fat mass and the fat-free mass. But it is simple, can be done in the clinic. Hydrostatic weighing, that is a little very fancy type of thing that they do for the athletes. I have not seen it, but basically it is on the Archimedes principle that fat is more buoyant than lean muscle. So you will weigh less when you are submerged in the water, and through that they are doing the body composition analysis. Air displacement plethysmography, this is BOD-POD. Again, I have not seen that being done, mainly for research and for athletes, and they are doing the air displacement to see your body density. Now, this is BIA, which we are doing in the clinics, and it is the most popular method. It sends electric current through the body, very, very small frequency of currents, and through that they are estimating the body fat and other things. And there are many models available, from a simple scale to a big machine. And even you can get a machine for 2,000 rupees to the big machines, which are now coming around 15 to 20 lakh rupees. What they do, they give you a total body analysis and a segmental analysis. They will give you a total body fat, fat-free mass, all those things. And for each arm and leg also, they will tell you the lean mass and the fat mass. Apart from that, they estimate your visceral fat also and your subcutaneous fat, but that is an estimation through equations. Now, basically, 3 parameters are important in that: weight, skeletal muscle mass, and body fat mass. And most of us have a C-shaped body type. That is, we have less skeletal mass, more weight, and more body fat. So the middle one is the, if you do your body composition analysis, I'm sure most of us will have a C type of body. DEXA is quite accurate, but then again, this is X-ray, and there is a small radiation, which is very, very small, but it is an accurate measure of your fat, bone, lean mass. So this is quite accurate and done. If you need it really for a research purpose, you can do it, or for some occasional patient where you are in a diagnostic dilemma. And this not only tells you about the bone, it will tell you fat mass, lean mass, total mass, and more than that, it tells you about the visceral adiposity and the subcutaneous. And 3D photonic scanning, this is, you stand on a pedestal, you are rotated, and the light waves will scan you, and it is also quite accurate to give you all the measurements of body fat. Then comes the imaging. The CT scan, very good. Now, these imaging is very good for subcutaneous fat and visceral fat measurements, and any visceral fat measurement over 130, some people say over 100, indicates obesity, and also skeletal muscle mass. And then MRI is even more better for your abdominal fat segmentation, visceral fat. Also about the intramyocellular fat, MRI is very good to tell you about these things. In our practice, we are using the BIA analyzers. They are non-invasive. They can be, I mean, every model is available. But the only thing is hydration status of your body will change their measurement. And many equations they are using, which are, fixed equations. So accuracy may not be that much as a DEXA or a CT MRI, but they are very practical and in use continuously. And each has its limitations, which we have discussed. Now comes the final question: why you want a body composition analysis? So the first thing is, it will tell you about your body fat. it will tell you about your body fat. Any body fat more than 25% in male and 32 or 35% in female is excess adiposity. You will be surprised to know if you do yours, maximum Indians will find it more than 30%. My own body fat is 34, 35%. And I was also surprised to see that. Second use is, so first it is like your horoscope. First at least see what you are made of. Second, it's a tracker. Supposing you start doing lifestyle measures or you start some drugs for obesity, if your patient starts some drug, you can track it. So it's very good to track it because it's non-invasive. You can keep on doing it every month or 2 months and see how your patient is doing. These are the things. This is a track report showing every month how they are doing it. The person body fat, skeletal muscle mass, weight, and this is how, if a person changes and you show him on the machine, there is a lot of enthusiasm and a positive mindset then to go for these obesity measures. The third thing is, every patient you want to know what is the visceral fat. Subcutaneous fat is not too dangerous. Visceral fat will release cytokines. The cytokines are the damaging things causing cardiovascular disease, diabetes and other things. So if you see a person who's not very fat, but you see high amount of visceral fat on his body composition analysis, you can advise him, low calorie diet and resistance exercises and many other things. And some people who look excessively fat may have very less visceral fat and lot of subcutaneous fat. So you categorize a patient whether he has a high subcutaneous fat or he has a high visceral fat. And visceral fat is a problem. It's a big problem. Now the whole conference, I think, is revolving around GLP-1 agonist. And GLP-1 agonists are very good for glucose, weight, blood pressure, but they will give you a weight loss. And with this weight loss, you will get a lean muscle loss. And these studies, the STEP 1 trial in 2021 and the SUSTAIN 8 trial on semaglutide, says that you can lose anywhere between 10 to 40% of your muscle mass. So with the weight, 30% of your muscle will go, but not the other way around. You leave the drug, you regain weight, you will regain fat. The muscle will not come back. So there are now various protocols which are saying that on GLP-1 agonist, have a high protein diet, do resistance exercise, and they are very well laid protocols for all this. Then the third problem is the normal weight obesity. This is again the thin fat Indian which we are seeing. We look normal weight, but when we do body composition analysis, you will find high amount of fat in your viscera. And this is due to adipocyte hypertrophy, fatty liver and all, very common pathology in your clinics. And you will if a person comes, you will say you look very fit. But you see his body composition, it will be high visceral fat. So this is thin fat Indian and low muscle. But can low muscle contribute to diabetes? Solely low muscle? So this sarcopenia, now there are a lot of lectures on assessment of sarcopenia. I will not go into that, but just one slide and the last one you see. 1 kg body weight hand grip means 1 kg less hand grip. 1 point less hand grip in South Indians, you are 12 times more prevalence of diabetes. Means even if your hand grip is little less, you are more prone, and hand grip is an indicator of sarcopenia. So you can do that dynamometer test and you can tell your patients you are sarcopenic. Even if you are not diabetic or pre-diabetic, now you are high chances of developing diabetes if you don't improve your muscle mass. And the last thing I want to tell you how it is useful for us in the clinic is you get a lean diabetic. You get a lean diabetic, you don't know it is early onset type 2. Is it MODY? Is it LADA? You want to do 15,000 genetic tests? Patient is not keen. And now if we see type 1, you will have low C-peptide, you need an antibodies positive. LADA, you can have low C-peptide, antibodies can be positive. KPD is obese patient, that is ketosis prone. Between type 2 early onset and MODY, sometimes a patient comes very fit, athletic type of patient, fasting sugar 250, PP is 350. You don't know what is happening. Now if you tell them he has a family history, not very certain, but 3-generation family history, but type 2 also has a very strong family history. So here if you do a body composition analysis, you find C-peptide is okay, that means insulin production is okay. Then you find high amount of visceral fat, you find liver fat, you find high triglyceride, you find low HDL. This person goes for early onset type 2 diabetes. Supposing you find this person not too much of visceral fat, liver fat is just grade 1 or not there. This person, and C-peptide is just little low or normal, this person you can go for genetic test and think that it is a Modi kind of diabetes. So any lean person coming to you, this test will help you to even diagnose. This is not given much in the books, but this is what, while researching on this, I found out that this can be a very useful test, especially for the people who are lean diabetics. And the other thing is the intramuscular fat deposit. You cannot see. The MRI and the CT scans can show you this. Again, you find a very athletic kind of person, very thin, very smart looking guy, IT, corporate office worker, and his diabetes fasting 200, PP 300. What's happening? Sometimes you get a family history of very severe insulin resistance, and if you do their if you do their body composition analysis, you will find that there is a high intramuscular fat that can be seen on MRI or CT. These people, if you give the glitazones, the pioglitazones and all, that can increase your, it's a very good drug for insulin resistance in the muscles for the fat. And these persons, I had a patient like this, was on 4 times insulin and improved with 30, and then I increased to 45 milligram of pioglitazone. He came off insulin because his was muscular fat. So this is how you see the MRI fat fraction mapping. So now all these AI tools are there in the MRIs and CTs, can give you a fraction. What is your fat fraction? And for 1% increase in the fatty muscle fraction, the muscle fat, you have about 7% increase in cardiovascular risk. So body composition analysis is here to stay. You should get it in your clinic. And I think it is very useful not only to know what is your body composition, not only to know what your patient's body composition is, also to diagnose certain things. And especially in normal weight obesity and in lean diabetics, it will also help you for diagnosis. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Yeah.